Okay, we left off at topic 20. So 21 is where we're starting in. This is part of operations and logistics, but this time we're going to be pushing the wrong button. There it is. We're going to be talking about the phone net frequencies that we use for all of this. They depend a lot on where you're going to be physically related to who you're talking to. And these charts are available on ARRL's website and at a ham fest near you or a ham club near you. They're always available. We have a pile of them that we can hand out at the Harrisburg Radio Amateur Club meetings. However, you can print them out off of online at the ARRL.organization. It's ORG. I always try to make it a com. It's not. And what that tells you is where the bands are, where the phone frequencies are in the band, and on and on. So the choosing a phone net frequency, that's one of the first things you need to do when you're getting ready to do a net and you're planning to do a net. Not this isn't last minute stuff that you do. This is what you have to plan ahead for. And the choice is based on the locations that you're going to cover and the availability of repeaters, the distance, the terrain, and band conditions. Using something here in Harrisburg that we have used and we were involved with for quite a long time was Red Cross. And the when we did the Red Cross stuff, it covers a county. It covers all of Dauphin County. So the northern part of Dauphin County one time did not have any repeaters. And if they were there, they weren't reliable. But now they've got their act together up here. The club reformed a number of years ago, and they're keeping the repeater up. But we had to have, for the Red Cross, we had to have a station at the Red Cross headquarters over on 6th Street in Harrisburg. We had to have one at Line Mountain High School, which is way up at the upper end of the county. And of course, that's with all the mountains in the way and so forth. It never made it. So we had to use HF. And we found that at night, the best thing to use was 75 meters phone, or some of you call it 80 meters, but the phone portion. And that's why we actually have all of the nets that we do for MCOM on 75 meters at the upper end. That's kind of it's a common place for us to trim our antennas so that they work. So it's at the very upper end. But anyway, that's how we had to get the signals up to Line Mountain High School, which was a Red Cross. I always call them refugee centers. They weren't. They were the centers where everybody went. The evacuation centers. So it's preferred to use VHF and UHF FM if at all possible during most of these local operations because the equipment is common. Everybody can use it. It's portable. It's clear of voice, and the coverage is extended by the repeaters. But the most important thing is, even a technician, as the entry level license, can use them, and that's why it's important to use them. Now, the large areas, like I said, that are not covered with repeaters, 75 meter single sideband, and of course on 75 meters lower sideband, that's what we use around here. Other areas may be different, and it's typically 40 meters and 80 meters that we use for this because it just covers better locally than 20 meters and up. Now, what Dell user is that? Waiting. Okay, one more. Hold on while I find the right buttons. So I obviously I get ahead of myself all the time here. The most common is 40 and 80 meters, and an NVIS near vertical incident skywave antenna is what you need. Now this name became a buzzword over the last 15 years. And everybody thinks an NVIS antenna is something really special and unique, but all it means is that a 40 or 80 meter antenna is less than a quarter wavelength above the ground. And we used to be called, before this became the NVIS antenna, we always called them cloud burners. Why? Well, because the angle of radiation off of an antenna that is that low to the ground as a dipole is almost vertical. So it goes up and hits the ionosphere and bounces down pretty darn close to where you are. And in terms of 75 and 40 meters, that means you're going to cover the state or the county or whatever it is you're working with really well. And when in the Sunday mornings, we do a net at 993.5 on 75 meters Sunday mornings. And my antenna always gives a really strong signal to the net operator wherever they may be. And they always remark about it, how strong signal is, because my antenna for that is about 30 feet off of the ground. And at the one end, it droops a little bit. At the other end, it's up a little higher. That's deliberate. That way, it gives it that NVIS effect. Now, what you'll hear a lot of people saying is they want to borrow an NVIS antenna, and what they're thinking is the best one is a Buddy Pole. It's a company that makes them. You don't need that fancy stuff. Take some wires, learn how to make an antenna, and you're all good. Long haul communications, international stuff is on 15 and 20 meter nets. Typically, this cycle of the sunspots, 20 meters is what we're using because it seems to work better. Excuse me. And knowing your resources, many MCOM groups have pre-selected number of frequencies for specific purposes. And we do have a list for Dauphin County, and every other county in the South Central area here has grouped together and call it the South Central Task Force. And there are frequency lists available, which I do have to, now that we're covering this, I need to put that, get that to Bob so we can put that up on the, on all of our, like our Facebook pages and so forth that we have, groups that we have, so that everybody can get a copy of the frequencies, and they should be in your jump kit ready to go. And become familiar with the coverage of the repeaters and digital meshing systems in the area. That by practicing and playing with that stuff, the repeaters, obviously you can, if you can hit a repeater, doesn't mean you can always talk to it. Make sure you get somebody on it that you can talk to. One of the biggest things I hear from new hams is, I can hit 60 repeaters from my house. Question is, how many of them can you actually carry on a conversation on? Because your signal may be so marginal, you're just bringing it up, but you need to be able to have a conversation on. So that's something in your spare time is you need to get on the air, and you need to find out where you can talk to from your location, and then program your radios ahead of time with the frequencies, the offsets, the CTCSS tones are sometimes called PL tones, or the repeater tones that you need to bring those repeaters up. And the same thing can be said about Simplex on 2 meters and 440 as well. Well, now we call it 2 meters and 70 centimeters. It shows my age. We were just calling it something different in those days. Know your resources in advance. Know which repeaters are for emergency communications in the area. We know which ones are here. 440, 448.075 is one that's an emergency one. And we have 145.11 and 147.075. They are all earmarked as the first channels of your emergency communications for the county of Dauphin, and other counties often use them as well to get in with us. Other counties have their own, but they will come onto our frequencies to reach us. And how does it identify? You got to get to know the sound of it. Will they be available for exclusive MCOM use, or must they be shared with other users? These repeaters that I mentioned, when it is emergency time, emergency takes precedence over normal ham use on those repeaters. And you get to know how it identifies as, or get used to the sound of it when it comes up, that you know you're hitting the right repeater, and find out the dead spots in the critical areas and how much power is required to reach the repeater with a clear, quiet signal from any of the key locations where you may be. And that, again, is just by driving around. You'll find that a handheld radio is probably not what you're going to be using during some of the emergencies, but it doesn't hurt to test out your handheld radios too by going to different locations, pulling over to the side road, get out, at a rest stop or whatever, and make some contacts on some of the repeaters, find somebody to talk to. And does the repeater have a courtesy tone? That courtesy tone is a beep, and you get used to what it sounds like. The tones change depending on the repeater's mode often. Um, some of them are set up for just the craziest things. They will, there was one locally here who the repeater designer made the repeater comeback tone. It would beep when it would hear your signal. The higher the pitch, the weaker your signal. And when it went lower, it means you were closer. There are all kind of things that can be done with those tones. They can also indicate if it's on emergency power or if it's on regular power. And there's so many things that those tones can be programmed to do. And timeout timer is another important thing to know about these repeaters. Uh, I've heard so many times, some of the repeaters have a 30-second timeout. I mean, you can talk for up to 30 seconds, it's going to dump you. Others, it's 3 minutes, somewhere in between, usually. Uh, but why are they set that way? Well, the idea of a repeater is often not to rag, chew, or key down and talk about one subject for 5 minutes. That's what 75-meter phone is for. That's where you do that kind of stuff. But on the repeaters, they were meant for mobile communications initially, and they still are. And mobile communications could run out of string with well, we call it that. You could run out of range of the repeater, and you wouldn't know it. You'd be there talking away, and you're not hitting the repeater. So, and it also allows the time for emergency or priority traffic to break in as necessary. If you're carrying on a conversation about where you got the best pizza last night, and somebody has a real emergency that's come up suddenly, uh, and they need to be on to get information, they don't need to hear you talking about that pizza for 5 minutes. That's just an example, but there you go. And the other thing is the repeaters a part of a linked system? And what does it have? Is it touch tone commands or CTCS tones that activate them? Linked systems are kind of cool. Now we had at one time here in the Harrisburg area, we had linked 145.47 with there had to be it linked all the way up through the Poconos and down to New Jersey and so forth. And there are still some UHF repeaters that link to a lot of different places. There's one run by the Penn State group, and there is a UHF repeater. I think it's on the Somerdale Mountain over that way. I think it's on the Wink 104 tower. I'm not sure, but it could be. And that one is linked to State College in New Jersey and a few other places. And you get to know them. And sometimes those come in handy when you're in an emergency situation. Um, Net frequencies that support digital communication systems such as packet, radio bulletin board messaging, AMTOR, PSK31, and RIDI. There are some of them here. We have those on Blue Mountain out near Linglestown at a great location in the same tower as a 145.21 repeater. And that one is packet. It's a bulletin board messaging system, and you have to know which software they use. And there are several different kinds. And if you listen, okay, I'll go through the rest of this. Do the digital systems have mailboxes or digipeater functions? The mailboxes, you can store a message and someone can pick it up for them. And digipeaters functions mean it's a digital repeater in that it will take a message and forward that on to another repeater if it has a key code in it that tells it who's supposed to get the message. If it's coming to me, it's addressed to WB3, BKN, and whatever other codes are needed to get it to me. And it will find a path by linking it to other repeaters and being forwarded on. That's what that means, digipeater. And which other nodes can they connect to? Can traffic be passed over the internet link automatically or manually? Some repeaters have nodes. Nodes are computer connected systems like IRLP, Internet Radio Linking Protocol program, the Echo Link and so forth. and you need to know which they connect to. Locally, we have 2 repeaters that connect to the IRLP system, 145.29 locally in Harrisburg, and 145.21 is a private repeater, and only the guy that owns it knows how to get you in and out of it, but he'll help you out. And they do have a way of showing you that on the nets that they have on their repeater on several different nights of the week. I know there's one digital repeater net where they talk about packet, AMTOR, PSK 31, and so on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. Unfortunately, it's I'd say at 8. Our net for our Harrisburg Radio Amateur Club is at 7, so that 8 o'clock you can be on the digital net with the 145.21. On that, they will take you through everything you need to know how to work digital communications, and they help you one step at a time. If you have a little trouble at first, ask. They will talk you through how to get your equipment set up so that you can pass messages. And then they spend the rest of the next several hours coming up with messages, pictures, and so forth, sending them back and forth. Great way to learn about packet and other digital forms is on 145.21. They have a tech net where they talk about technical things Sunday nights, again at 7 or 8, I think it's 8. And someone may jump in and correct me. And then on the IRLP system that they have, Thursday nights, they get together and a group of people will get on and they'll connect to other countries, other cities, whatever, across the world and give you a chance to talk to people. I was listening last week. They were talking to Australia quite a bit, different people passing it around in different cities of Australia. It was pretty cool. And you learn. That's the best way is hands-on. 145.21 repeater does a lot of that. And how many connections can they support at once? There are several that'll handle a lot, some only a few, and that's what you got to learn by doing. In the network coverage concerns in MCOM managers rely on Simplex operation when planning their UHF and VHF FM nets. Repeaters often do not survive disasters or are overwhelmed with the amount of traffic. That's not uncommon. So you need to know what your Simplex coverage is as well. And if you're lucky enough, like Dan, who lives up on top of a very high hill, I'm sure, Dan, you can get Simplex just about anywhere. And those of us who are down a little bit lower, things get in the way, terrain and so forth, antenna heights, the gain of your antenna, and the output power from your radio, that all affects your Simplex operation. And you need to be able to continue an operation over a wide area, and it can be challenging. But when you get used to working Simplex, and those of us who were around before the proliferation of repeaters did an awful lot of Simplex. We always had 11 element beams on our roof that we could turn. The popular antenna of the day was the Ringo Ranger. It was a gain antenna. It took up very little wind abuse. It took up all the wind abuse it would take because it wasn't a big footprint. You can still buy them, by the way. And they're great antennas. Tune them up. You have a home station and you can work a lot of Simplex. And it was not uncommon and isn't from my house, which is in Upper County, Dauphin County, to be able to reach Harrisburg areas. Hershey was an easy job for me, all the way up through Wilkes-Barre and Scranton we can hit. You'd be surprised how far on the right antenna your Simplex is going to take you. There are repeater coverage maps that you can get a hold of for the 7.6 repeater, which is pretty much the same as the 2.1 repeater coverage, only ours is a little bit lower on the antenna than the 2.1 on top of the tower. But the repeater coverage map is on the Harrisburg Radio Amateurs Club site of w3uu.org. And that gives you an example here, a repeater coverage map. The antenna height that figures into it and the terrain of how many mountains are around you. And pre-test everything because you want to avoid last minute surprises. and you want to be able to know that you can test all the fixed locations in your area for coverage, which is a good idea, again, for starting a simplex net, which we have talked about. And if you're serving the Red Cross, test simplex coverage from each of the official shelters to the Red Cross office and the city's EOC or other, it's the Emergency Operations Centers, what EOC means, or other key locations, and the mobile coverage in the same area. Just like I said earlier, take your radios and go out and start talking. Now, we do not at this time have a Red Cross radio system set up. There was one some years ago. Most of those radios are now in our club's uh, mobile trailer that we have, so we can do some special things. The trailer's in the process of being rebuilt. It should be done by spring, and we all get to go out and play with it. In fact, it was done before, because now that it's insulated properly and we can heat it, we could go about anywhere. So you try some things like that. Improving the simplex range. Use an antenna with greater gain. Like I said, a beam or a gain antenna such as the Ringo Ranger, and other names of them escape me now. Simple antennas like a disc cone are not gain antennas. A quarter wave antenna on a pizza pan outside your window is not a gain antenna. You need something that's going to give you a little more gain. Move the antenna away from obstructions and use a directional antenna like a beam. Increase the height of your antenna and increase the power output as a last resort. Now, that's another thing about the Ringo Ranger, why they were so popular. And I'm sure they're still available. They were made by Cushcraft, which was taken in, I believe, by MFJ. They could fit on the pipes you would buy at Radio Shack to put up a TV antenna. You can buy those pipes now at a local Walmart, and they're 10 feet long or 5 feet long. Start putting them together, raise it up, get a couple of mounts that you can screw fast to the side of the house or your chimney, and you had an antenna up with a good gain. Portable duplex repeaters. These are pretty cool because you can quickly deploy them at high points and around you in the desired coverage area. It has just the reach and hear the stations in your net. We used to use them. We used to make these out of handheld radios. I'm going back into the mid 70s. I made a repeater controller, put it into a little Radio Shack box with controls in the front where I could control the amount of hang time of the repeater and so forth. And the idea of that was real simple. You could plug two HTs together, handheld radios. One would key the other, one was receive, one was transmit. And with the proper offset for your operation, you could create a mobile repeater instantly. And I still have them. I use them on occasion. And that's not to be confused with the simplex repeater, because those are pretty much garbage. They're fun, but they don't work. And where you put these in the back seat of your car using a mobile antenna and parked on a ridge over on the top floor of a parking garage or whatever. We would put, without the duplexers. Duplexers are what makes repeaters use the same antenna. We had to put a quarter wave on the back and one on the front hood. Back hood, trunk lid, and hood is where we put the antennas, and it was just enough blocked signal that it worked between the two. And portable masts and trailer mounted towers are another option that you can use. Crossband repeat is a whole different animal, but it does something pretty cool. And there are a lot of radios that do it. The ones that we have installed at the county sites, at all the municipal buildings within Dauphin County, there are these radios. They are separate. They are one radio that has two transceivers in it. They are the ICOM 2720s. I have a Yaesu 8800, does the same thing. There are a lot of crossband repeater radios made now. And what the idea of it is, you can have it sitting on a mountaintop and it goes across the bands. Your input to it is on UHF or 70 centimeters. The output is 2 meters. And they are dual band radios. The mobile can relay your transmission to a repeater for greater range, or they can be used on low power setting to cover your local area. If the handheld radio you have is dual watch, you can program it to receive the UHF and receive the VHF and transmit on the UHF. And that radio they're showing there, I have one here. It's the Kenwood triple bander, that HT that's there. And the one that is the mobile unit, that is the Yaesu 8800, I believe. Some of this can be a little confusing until you get to actually see them, and we're going to work on that too. And the actual practice, and our choices are limited to the available operators and their equipment. In other words, the licensing and the equipment that you have determines where we're going to work. Net manager will occasionally need to shift resources to meet the changing needs. Early stages of an emergency, tactical nets may require more operators. Later stages, health and welfare, the traffic might increase a little bit in the later stages. Message relays, 2 radios can't connect directly, so they will go through a relay. A relay is a common term. It's just not a little term thrown out here in this presentation. In any net, if the receiving station can't hear the person out in the field, he'll call for a relay. And in the Simplex operation, this is how it works. He says, I need a relay. So someone who can hear both of them will step in and say, I'll take the relay. And the third station comes in and carries that traffic and then relays it to the net controller. So shown here in a pair of shorts and a cap sitting in an office. So radio room security. Well, that's an important thing too. You don't want clowns in there messing up what you're doing. Allow only the operators who are on duty to be in the room. Protect your equipment, protect the messages you handle, because they can be sensitive, and prevent unnecessary distractions. Avoid leaving the radio room equipment unattended and accessible. Not only is that a violation of your federal communications license that you have for ham radio, it's just really stupid to do, because somebody could do anything from remove that equipment and take it with them, or get on the radio and start saying things and thinking they're on channel 19 of your local CB. And don't allow members of the press to be in the room without specific permission from the served agency. That's important too, because we all know now that press, they love to get the scoop. They love to hear stuff, and they'll often take things that are not supposed to be for public to hear, and they will start writing it down. And next thing you know, everybody's in trouble for getting things out that will make others panic. And if there's sensitive messaging, like, if someone passed away or whatever, that's not for them to hear. Most served agencies will expect you to keep records of your operations. And early on, for those who were with us from the first ones, they said, how long do we keep these logs? Well, there are reasons to keep a log. And I said, well, there are reasons, and we'll get into them. We're into them. Most served agencies will expect you to keep records of your operations, the original copies of any messages sent, the station logs, any memos, and any official correspondence. Keep it, because when you're dealing with that, they may say things like, we never got the message. This is your only proof, your station logs and your memos and your official correspondence. Some even are required to keep scratch notes and informal logs. Keep these records in your own possession for a time, or turn them to someone, or to turn some or all the records over to the agency at the end of the operations. I like to do copies, and I will give them copies of everything. And what about records that are on a computer? Know your agency's policy in the beginning. I will, in some of these cases, when I was in the early days with PIMA, we would do these on our laptops or whatever. They had a computer in there. I'd set up spreadsheets and we'd use them. In some agencies, your station records are permanent and important legal documents and must be treated as such. And your served agency's policy on record keeping. You got to know that in advance so that you can comply with them from the very beginning of your operations. And it is true, they become for most of these real emergencies, they become an official document. Record keeping station operating log should contain these: your arrival and departure times, the times you checked in and out of specific nets, each message by number, the sender, addressee, and hold on, I had to let somebody else in. Each message by number, sender, addressee, and other handling stations, the critical events, the damage, power loss, injuries, earth tremors, other emergencies or critical events, and staff changes, both MCOM and site management, if known, and equipment problems and issues that you have. All these are important, need to be kept as records. Every individual message should be labeled with a time and date. And just as, in the days when we sent memos through the office, everything had to be signed and dated, and we had another form that said, I've received this. If we send messages, we have to do the same thing. They all got to have it. And scratch notes, and I use all kind of paper for that. That all has to go on a sheet so that you have that information later to determine the course of events. And portable office type file box, expanding file, or any other suitable container can be used to organize and file the messages. These little guys are available at everywhere, every office supply store, and places that I don't know who we go to now. I guess Walmart has everything. So that's where we end up. And dealing with stress. Well, most people are not used to working under extreme stress for long periods of times, and they don't know how to handle it. It's can cause nervous breakdowns. They're common among those who get overwhelmed and have not learned to manage stress and stress causing situations. Well, I know that a lot of people don't handle stress well. And I think I used to, maybe not so much now sometimes, but it can make you disoriented, unable to make good decisions, lose your temper, behave in ways you never thought you would at any other time, unable to make any decision, you get confused. Stressful jobs. It can be that because you're passing so many messages. So the tendency is to regard every situation or need as an emergency requiring an immediate response. Well, you might get a barrage of requests for actions, and you might not have the extra seconds it requires to fully consider the options or to prioritize your actions. And the result is an overload of responsibility, which can lead to unmanageable levels of stress. You cannot eliminate disaster-related stress. It's just part of the job. And you can certainly take steps to reduce it and control it. And that's to be a little more organized and to expect ahead of time. Example, in a recent activation, an after action report commented on how one radio amateur operator supporting the EOC worked for 36 straight hours. He was praised for his dedication. What's good about this? Well, what's good, he was in control and knew where everything was, he or she. And what's the problems with it? And well, there's a lot of problems with that being there that long. And how would you have handled the situation if you were this operator or if you were the MCOM manager? Well, in a recent exercise debriefing, an amateur operator said that in the event of an earthquake, if he was assigned second shift at the EOC, he would not stand idle waiting for his shift. He would assist in other ways in community and then proceed to his work and his 12-hour shift. What's good, he knows what it's like out on the field. What's wrong with it? He's tired already. Then he goes in to do his EOC shift. And what would you do awaiting the part of your EOC shift? I'd be relaxing and maybe listening to the radio traffic to get a feel for the situation rather than be out getting worn out. Someone dealing with a big ego, someone with an emergency response can have a big ego. Others with a need to be in full control at all times, and they take time now to consider how you respond to each of these challenges they present. Egos are a thing that you don't want to have in a situation like this. You're there to serve an agency, you're there to work with others and expect them to work with you. If you come in and say, it's my way or the highway, and start belittling people during the event, not a good thing. And eventually people will say, well, I'm going to secure my station, and they don't have to take it. They're volunteers. They're not employees. Others with a need to be in full control at all times, that's a big ego. And I've said it so many times, leave your ego outside. In a position where I hire in my company, I hire people to be DJs at nightclubs and for parties and so forth. And every DJ has an ego. Every radio operator has an ego when they're in this situation too. And I tell them, park that ego somewhere else. We're going on your performance, not on what you feel you are. Same goes with radio people too. Come up with a different and more positive response strategy, not anger. Depending on the official position of the problem person, you might do these. Do your job as best you can and deal with it after the emergency is over. Politely decline and state your reasons. Politely decline and refer to the issue to a superior. Choose in advance to volunteer in another capacity and avoid this person altogether. Well, I would say in these, do your job the best you can. Deal with it after the emergency is over. During it is not the time. And next time, you may want to avoid working with that guy altogether. Stress management tips. Delegate some of your responsibilities to others. Take on those tasks only you can handle. Great idea. Prioritize your actions. The most important and time sensitive ones come first. And you can determine that on the fly. Do not take comments personally. Mentally translate personal attacks into constructive criticism and a signal that there may be an important need that is being overlooked. And in the heat of the moment, you might say something wrong. Well, don't take it personally. And also take a few deep breaths and relax. Do it often, especially if you feel stress increasing. Gather your thoughts and then move on. Watch out for your own needs. You need food, rest, water, and medical attention. Take it because everybody has needs. And if you were to be working, make sure you drink because often you think, I can't drink because then I'm going to have to leave here to go to the bathroom. It's part of being a human. Your body needs to have water in it to work. Stress management is do not insist on working more than your assigned shift if others can take over. Don't try to be the hero. Get rest when you can so that you can and will be ready to handle your job more effectively later on. Take a moment to think before responding to stress-causing challenges. If needed, tell them you'll be back in a few minutes. If you are losing control of a situation, bring someone else in to assist or notify a superior. Don't let them bully you. I hate using that word, but it does happen. You'll get people on your nets who will think they know what they're doing. They're going to do things to mess you up, but don't let them get to you. Don't let a problem get out of hand before asking for help, and also keep an eye on other team members and help them reduce the stress for them whenever possible. In long-term operations, additional operators to allow for regular shift changes will be needed, and those who go home. You need additional people to cover shift changes for those who will go home. You should have replacement equipment as operators leave with their own gear, or if it fails. You should have food and water, suitable place to rest or sleep, generator fuel, because you're probably going to be on emergency fuel, fresh batteries. Doesn't hurt to have a big pile of batteries with you for things that need them. Sanitation facilities and shelter and managing and handling supplies forms, alternate NCS operators, that's the net control station operators for backups, and additional net resources to handle net traffic, like your resources, like your forms and so forth. Make sure you have enough of them. You will eventually need to recharge your batteries. Some batteries need more time to recharge than others, and that's time needed to take into account when you're planning. Um, you'll see a lot of times that when you buy a radio, you can have the option, or sometimes it comes with it, the ability to put into your handheld radio batteries. Like, and I'm talking off the shelf nickel metal hydride batteries. Make sure you get those things to have them with you, because if you have some things on charge and they may need to have enough on hand to last the entire length of the operation, and you may run out of them until they're charged. Make sure you have some ever readies handy to have with you, and make sure a radio can handle them. Deep cycle marine batteries can require a full day or longer to fully charge. A single lead acid battery, and they're known as gel cells, require about 18 hours to recharge. NiCads, which we no longer have, lithium ion, and nickel metal hydrides. Hold on. He can leave a message. Unfortunately, it's one of my radio stations that I have to deal with, so we'll see about him later. Anyway, the sealed lead acid batteries known as gel cells require 18 hours, depending on the size. And like I said, the lithium ions, nickel metal hydrides, and similar batteries can be charged quite quickly. Repeated rapid charging cycles can reduce the overall battery life. I have a couple of chargers here. I have one that'll recharge a nickel metal hydride in 1 hour, and others, it takes 14. When I don't need them in a hurry, they get the 14-hour charge because it makes them last longer. When you're in an emergency, that 1 hour one, that's really a good one to have. And Steve needs back in. Steve keeps leaving us.
Sorry, my cellular propagation is not good.
Oh, I wondered what was going on. All right. Generator and power safety, placement of generators, engine noise, they do create noise. And it's difficult for shelter residents and volunteers to get much needed rest, and anyone trying to do their job if there's a lot of noise. What do you do with them? Place them further away. Exhaust fumes should not be allowed to enter into the building or nearby tents or vehicles. Downwind of any occupied location is best. And in the stuff that I carry, we've got 50-foot and 100-foot cables that we'll use for them if necessary. Of course, nowadays, the generators that we use are Hondas. They last a lot longer and they put out less fumes. Earth grounding is not required as long as only plug and cord connection equipment is used, and the generator meets national electric codes and standards. The exception is for generators that will be connected, even temporarily, to the building's permanent electrical system. And for further details on grounding AC electrical systems, refer to Article 250 of the National Electrical Code. Primary hazards to avoid when using a generator are carbon monoxide poisoning from the toxic engine exhaust, electric shock or electrocution, and fire. Follow directions supplied with the generator. Every year, people die of incidents related to portable generator use. Don't be one of them. Generator replacement. Generators are placed, their placement, generators are placed in an area off limits to unauthorized persons and children. Generators in dry is dry and not used in rain, wet conditions. Generators operating on a dry surface under an open canopy-like structure, such as under a tarp, is what should use. Generator, make sure the generator is operating outdoors in a well-ventilated area. The generator is also operating away from air intakes to any structure, and all operations are usually operators are using dry hands before touching the generator. Great stuff. Well, anyway, I have had one place where the generator was parked outside of a cellar door or a basement door, and on the surface upstairs, there was nothing. You didn't smell anything. It all went into the basement. And wiring. A generator is not connected directly to existing wiring, avoiding backfeeding the system. The reason you don't want that, it may seem like, why wouldn't it? The electric power's out. Let's just plug it in and we'll get power into the building. Problem is, when somebody's out there working on the power lines, you're saying, okay, I've got 120 volts or 240 volts coming out of this generator. I plugged it in and it's feeding the building. If you don't shut off the breakers to the outside world, that 240 line goes through that pole transformer backwards, and the guy working on the power line where he thinks it's shut down is now going to be in danger of a 7,000 volt shock. That's because a transformer isn't just a one-way device. They go both ways. And generator grounding is use a ground rod or a large gauge wire, 8 or larger, to bond the generator to the frame or ground. This is in the building. And the generator is properly grounded per the manufacturer's manual. Also, wiring the generator is not connected directly to existing wire to avoid backfeeding, which we just covered. And individual devices are connected directly to the receptacle outlet on the generator or by approved extension cords. All that's important. And if you want to see it in action, follow us around field day or any of the other events that we do out on the road. Extension cords make sure they are outdoor rated or of sufficient gauge and length to handle the electrical loads without daisy chaining them. They're free of cuts and tears or cracked housings. And they have 3 conductors and the plugs are all 3-prong grounded and routed to prevent tripping hazard. You don't want people falling over your cables. Generator capacity loads, make sure the loads on them are less than the output rating of the generator. And the manufacturer's instructions, a copy of the generator's operating manual should be available at the generator site, and that the operation is consistent with all instructions in the generator's owner's manual. And fuel storage is always stored outdoors. And the fuel storage is always stored in properly labeled non-glass safety containers. And fully charged and approved fire extinguisher is always supposed to be there with that generator. And refueling a generator make sure it is off and cool before refueling. Shut down all equipment, make sure all the equipment is turned off before shutting off the generator. And be aware that the mufflers and other hot parts, make sure they're protected and labeled. And ground fault interrupters. GFIs will detect the difference in the currents flowing on the hot and neutral conductors, and then it'll open the circuit. And you can test any GFI device to be used with or near HF radios to be sure that the GFI will function properly when the radio is transmitting. Sometimes they pick up RF and they'll trip. AC extension cords should be rated for the actual load, and consider radios, lights, chargers, and all other accessories when calculating that load. Every item of equipment has a listing on it of how much current it will draw at its maximum. Don't overload your circuits. Extension cords are rated only for their actual length, and they cannot be strung together to make the cord longer without derating the cord's capacity. If your typical 16 gauge, 50-foot orange hardware store cord is rated for 10 amps, When 2 are used to run 100 feet, the rating drops to 7 amps. That wire has some resistance in it, and it becomes a load on the system. And you lose voltage over resistance. If you know the Ohm's law, that resistance gets more as you get longer, obviously, and you'll start losing voltage, and it'll also drop the current rating of that connection. Choose a single length cord rated for the load and the entire distance you must run it. If it is not possible, you can also run 2 or more parallel cords to the generator in order to reduce the load of a single cord. And for more information on portable power cords, there's Article 400 of the NEC will help you understand them. Romex, the type of wire for long extension cords, using Romex wire. Violation of the National Electric Code, and it's a dangerous practice to do it because repeated bending and rolling and abrasion causes the copper conductors and insulation to break, resulting in fire and electrocution hazard. These are meant for installation in your home or in a building, not to be moved around all the time. Use only the flexible extension cords that are UL rated for temporary portable use. Electrical safety guidelines. Electrical codes require 3-wire power cords and plugs on many tools and appliances. The hot wire is usually black, the neutral wire is white, and the frame ground is usually green or a bare wire. And you see that on your cables always. Do not install higher current capacity fuses in an existing circuit. You know, like back when they had the little screw-in glass ones, there was a common practice apparently of people putting pennies in there and then screwing that fuse in there. So a 15 amp circuit suddenly became a million amp circuit. I don't know how much a penny would use, but don't put bigger fuses in than it requires. And a good grounding. And we're probably going to stop at some point here. We're at 46 of 76. I don't want to drag it out too long. Ground everything. And this chart shows you things you would do. It's a 6 or 8 foot extent, a ground rod into the ground. And the top of it goes to the surface of the electrical panel. Ground your transmat, your keyer, your antenna switch, everything to that ground. And the 3-wire grounded outlets connected to the ground of the house electrical system. Well, this is your house electrical system. So the best protection from electrical shock is that all equipment should be connected to a common ground. Before these things were understood and put into practice, I mean, there were people that I know this one from my brother had a mobile home when he first got married, and they didn't have a proper grounding on it. The grounds weren't right, and they could be standing on like the heating ducts were metal. They could be standing on one of them and reach up to a light and get shocked, or they could step across to the outside porch and get shocked. Not uncommon at the time. They didn't understand, and whoever wired it didn't follow enough guidelines. But grounding is very important. You don't want to get seriously killed, like this guy. Not seriously injured, seriously killed. And the fuse or circuit breaker should always be added in series with the home-built equipment that is powered to 120 volt AC lines. It used to be 110. And a 12 volt DC system fuses should be located at the voltage source in all of things. The fuse goes at the battery, not all the way up the wire. When a fuse blows, the open circuit is created, and never replace a blown fuse with a higher amp rated fuse or aluminum foil wrapped over them. I've seen it done, and I'm sure you all have too. And electrical and RF safety, fuses and circuit breakers. The purpose of the fuse in an electrical circuit is to interrupt the power in case of an overload. And if you install a 20 amp fuse in your transceiver in the place of a 5 amp fuse, excessive currents could cause a fire. And if it didn't cause a fire, it could still result in major damage to that equipment. Don't replace a small fuse with a larger one. And grounding is conducted to the green wire in 3-wire electrical systems. Now that takes us up to slide number 50. We have quite a few to go on this one. So at this point, we'll break at this point and pick it up on slide 50 in the next session. And does anyone have any thoughts, comments, or questions of anything we covered over here? This stuff seems a little tedious, but it is some of the important things that you have to know.